Well, good day to you. It is August the 16th, 2025. I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful day. My name is Gary Willing, and I want to welcome you to SOP, Save Our Planet. And I also want to do two more things before we get going. And that is, if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom after listening to this video, if you want to know more about the priorities of the teacher, if you want to see if this information is true, do a little digging, do a little investigation, do a little reading, and check out some of the information on some of the websites that I provided links for in the description portion of every one of these videos to help in your investigation. Check out the Share International site. The link is at the very top. You get the best background information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom there than you can anywhere else. The second thing is, if you want to join the discussion, post a comment. Let me know what you think. If you have a question you want to ask me about what I talk about here, ask your question by posting your question in the comments section. Or if there's something you want to talk about in relation to what we talk about here, email me, searchforsigns@mail.com. All right, now, I had a few questions, and I want to try to answer them in a bit, but I wanted to focus in on something that I haven't really talked about in a while. I can't remember the last time I had a video where I really honed in and focused in on UFO activity and what it means, what they mean for humanity and those kind of things. Now, I want to start by saying that Maitreya, after he's out known for who he is in the world, is going to be asked by our media really three questions about UFOs to get the whole thing started. First question he's going to be asked is, are they real? The second thing he's going to be asked is, where are they coming from? And then the third and obvious question is going to be, why are they here, right? Those are the questions that pretty much everybody has in reference to UFOs. Now, there's evidence that's coming out more and more and more. We're seeing evidence on YouTube, on the internet, even in the news about UFO activity. We're even starting to hear a little bit more from our governments about what they know and what they have always known about the work and activity of these space brothers. But when Maitreya is asked, are these UFOs real, he is going to say yes. And that is the truth about who and what these UFOs are and those kind of things. And then when he's asked, where are they coming from? He's going to say, they're coming from our own sister planets. They're humanity on some of these other planets in our solar system. Mainly Mars and Venus, but they are coming from some of the other ones as well. But they're not coming from another galaxy, they're not coming from another dimension, and they're certainly not coming from another solar system. They're coming from our own sister planets. And really the two planets that are closest to us in our solar system, like I said, Mars and Venus. And then, of course, when he's asked, why are they here? He'll say they're on a spiritual mission, and they mean us no harm. They've never harmed anyone. In fact, there's evidence of UFOs in our crop designs. They used to call them crop circles, but they're much more than crop circles now. And even in those, they don't harm the crops. The crops themselves are simply bent over and twisted in a way, but the stalks themselves are not broken. That's how harmless these beings are. But they're humanity. They're really us in the future and the potential of all of us as well. And just as these masters that I talk about are our own potential. And there isn't any aliens coming from another galaxy or another dimension that are doing us any harm. That's all. There's no truth to any of those. And Maitreya will really put that fear to rest because he'll speak the truth, that they mean us no harm. If they had been here to do us harm, they would have done us harm a long time ago. If they were here to take us over, they would have done it a long time ago. The other thing, too, I think Maitreya is going to talk about UFO activity is in reference to probably the single biggest danger to humanity, and that is the environment and what we're doing to the environment, how we're abusing the environment with the pollution. And the work and activity of the space brothers and sisters in these UFOs is really right now mainly to help clean up the atmosphere enough to keep our environment livable until we learn not to abuse the environment in that way. Some of the most alarming predictions about the environment, right, that we're headed to the tipping point, that once we get over that tipping point, the abuse that we're doing to the environment will be irreversible. In fact, Ben's master said that it was a lot sooner than most even the most alarming cries from our ecological scientists and environmental scientists and so forth were saying. They were saying 30 to 50 years. He was saying it was more like 10 to 15 years. And he wrote this back in the early 2000s. So we're already well past that point. Did we go past the tipping point? Well, we haven't yet, because these masters won't let us go back past the tipping point. And they're using the help of these space brothers and sisters in these spaceships to keep us from going over the tipping point. Now, we still have to deal with the environment. We can't just keep going on in the way that we're doing and expect them to do all the heavy lifting, but they are helping us until we learn not to do this. They're cleaning up our water, they're cleaning up our soil as much as they can, and of course they're cleaning up the atmosphere. Now, the other thing too is, when it comes to the environment and the talk about the abuse to the environment, it's mainly about greenhouse gases causing climate change. That's really what is on the lips of our politicians when they talk about the environment, the political debate about the environment, and of course coming from our own environmental scientists and so forth, that it's climate change. That's the biggest danger. The masters will agree to a degree that is the biggest danger, but it's not the biggest danger. There's another thing that we're doing that's causing more harm to the environment and to ourselves. But it's not to say that climate change isn't a problem and it isn't dangerous. So unfortunately and fortunately, our politicians are starting to listen to the cries of the people and the will of the people to do something about greenhouse gases. And so they've talked about building more nuclear power plants and so forth in the future. They're already starting to get permits to be able to do this. And it's good in a way. It's good because they are starting to listen to the needs of the people and what the people want, which is less greenhouse gases, of course. But the unfortunate thing is they're not understanding that is the biggest problem that we're doing, which is nuclear radiation is the biggest abuse that we're doing to the environment. How we store nuclear material, how we process it for the power, and how we dispose of it is the single biggest thing that we're doing to the environment that is harming the environment. So these nuclear power plants and the idea of putting more out there is probably not a good idea, actually. In fact, Maitreya will say quite urgently, when he's out known for who he is, that we need to shut down the nuclear power plants immediately. Now, what is causing the abuse? Because most scientists would say, well, there's no problem. And this is the reason why no one is talking about it, because our scientists don't understand that there's a pollution that we can't see. The masters call it the invisible peril. This radiation coming from the way that we store nuclear material, the way that we process it now, and of course the way that we dispose of it, is being measured by Geiger counters, which is a very old technology. It only measures radiation up to gas. So it measures the radiation in the soil, measures the radiation in the water, and of course it measures the radiation in the gas, but it doesn't measure the radiation on the 4 levels of physicality above gas, known as the etheric. Our scientists don't even know that those planes exist. It's already been proven by a scientist on Earth that he called it the orgon, but nobody really talks about it because nobody really knows about it. And nobody's talking about this pollution because they can't see it. Maitreya will tell us that every single droplet of rain that falls on our head and on our crops and that goes into our water and our food supply and so forth is saturated with nuclear radiation. There isn't anywhere in the world where this radiation is, not there. And it's what's killing us off. It's what's making us sick. It's what's causing diseases that should have been eradicated eons ago. It's also creating new diseases because our immune system is being overworked to keep us alive when we're having to deal with all the radiation out there. Early onset dementia is one of them. Early onset Alzheimer's, is a textbook condition that is caused by nuclear radiation because our immune system is being overworked in that way. I actually just read online not too long ago that there was a young person, I can't remember if it was a man or a woman, and I don't even think that they made it into their 20s yet, had already started to exhibit signs of Alzheimer's. It's crazy. I mean, Alzheimer's was a disease that usually was reserved for the elderly, after they had had years of dementia and so forth. Well, now it's starting to come even in much, much younger people, of course. And Maitreya will say this is a direct result of nuclear radiation. We need to stop doing the way that we're doing it. Now, we have the technology to do nuclear power in a different way. It's just more costly. And rather than having nuclear waste as a byproduct, the byproduct is clean drinking water, actually. It would totally clean up the environment. We wouldn't get quite as sick. The animals wouldn't be dying off in the way that they're doing. And we would also be able to eliminate some of the greenhouse gases in that way. So that is the plan that's on the table by Maitreya for humanity. But the single biggest problem that we're doing is we are harming the environment by the way that we're processing our nuclear power. And these space brothers and sisters are coming from other planets to help clean up the atmosphere. Now, I talked about the etheric. We don't know that the etheric's there. We can't see it unless we have etheric vision. So if we went to Mars, we would see nobody. If we went to Venus or any of these other planets, we wouldn't see anybody on those planets. But there's actually more people on Mars. There's 9.5 billion people on Mars, which is more people than there are on this planet, and it's a much smaller planet. But the evidence is there that, that we have these UFOs. We see them all the time. I know for myself personally, I've seen them a few times in my life. One of them, I actually asked Maitreya to show for my family, and he showed it, and a UFO showed up for my family one 4th of July. It was quite extraordinary. But I've seen them in other areas and other parts of the world and so forth, and which leads me to believe, without a doubt, that they're real. And this is something to consider too, in Trump's first term, toward the end of his first term, it was in summer of 2020, right when COVID was really capturing everybody's attention and all the headlines and so forth. So there wasn't a lot of attention on what happened. But there were people from the Pentagon who went to Congress to brief Congress on UFO activity, and they also went and spoke to Donald Trump at the time about UFO activity. Donald Trump didn't deny having the meeting. He just denied that there was any truth to what these people were saying to him. And I can understand why he said it, because that's who he is. But he isn't really unique in this way. Most politicians and most presidents would have probably said the same thing, to be honest. But the thing that I've thought about, and I've even talked about on this channel, is there isn't anybody in government at that level that would go to members of Congress or the president and brief them on UFO activity if they weren't 100% sure that this was true. So there's got to be some truth to it. And even Ben's master talked about how there will be so much evidence from now on that will keep coming out about UFO activity that people will eventually just have to say, there's got to be some truth to this. But, I remember, when I first heard about UFOs, it was not really believed. It wasn't really known. And when you really talked about it, there was this taboo kind of way of speaking about it, where people didn't even want to talk about it. But now it's mainstream, really, to be honest. And it's believed, I think, by probably more people than not at this point to be true. They just don't know where they're coming from, and they don't know why they're here. And Maitreya will put to rest the fear that most of us have about the work and activity of they call them aliens, but he'll call them space brothers and sisters. And they're from our humanity, from other planets and so forth. And he'll also have to explain the truth about the etheric planes. So, anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. All right. As I understand it, Jesus is one of the masters who will be coming out soon after Maitreya is known for who he is. What will his role be in the future? Okay, so Jesus' role in the future, and he's right, Jesus is one of the masters of wisdom. He's actually on the outskirts of Rome at the moment. But he's a teacher. Now, his teaching and what he'll be asked mainly, I think, is for the religious folks. But will he have other things that he'll talk about? Of course. You know what I mean? He'll talk about other things because he's a teacher for the whole world, just as Maitreya is a teacher for the whole world. He's a world teacher too, Now, he's not the world teacher like Maitreya is the world teacher, but he is a world teacher for sure. Now, he has billions of devotees, of course, all around the world that will be asking him all sorts of questions, keeping him busy day and night with their questions and their inquiries about the Bible, about what he meant, or what was said in the Bible about what he said and those kind of things. And of course, he'll have to say, well, yes, this is what this means, or what do you think that it means, or I didn't say anything like that at all, and that kind of thing. So he'll clear up some of the confusion and the distortions in the Bible, of course. Now, the other thing, too, that I think he'll do is he'll be a bridge for the relationship between Islam and Christianity and those who practice both religions, and the division that is, of course, there between those two religions, because he helped write Islam, or the Quran, excuse me. So he overshadowed Muhammad in the same way that Maitreya overshadowed himself when he was a disciple in Palestine. So the teachings of Jesus 2,000 years ago are the teachings of Jesus, of course, but they're also the teachings of Maitreya. They're coming from Maitreya, who overshadowed him at the time. The simple way that he spoke and the utterance of those kind of things, and the simple utterances are because of Maitreya and how Maitreya is. But the truths that Jesus spoke about are the truths for all of humanity. They're not Maitreya's truths. But when he talked about the law of cause-effect as what you sow, so shall you reap, that was coming from Maitreya. Now, there are things in the Quran that I'm sure Muhammad wrote himself, but the majority of the Quran was written by the Master Jesus. Now, the history of Jesus was he, of course, died on the cross. Christians say that he rose from the dead 3 days after, and they're right about that, but what happened, they're not understanding, and it's not for me to try to convince them of this, but Maitreya entered Jesus' body in the tomb, and when he did, that light of Maitreya was what emanated onto the shroud, and you can see it as the Shroud of Turin, or the Turin Shroud, or however you want to call it. And that image of Jesus on the Shroud of Turin is actual image of Jesus when he was in the tomb. It's a quite old artifact that Jesus will eventually say is him, and it will be proven to be authentic and those kind of things. Although there's this debate whether it's real or not, or what date it comes from, or whatever. But according to the masters, it's a real, authentic miracle. And Maitreya worked through the body of Jesus for the number of days that he was around, and then dematerialized the body. And that's why it's understood that Jesus went up into heaven and wasn't buried after that or anything like that. And then Jesus, some years after that, incarnated as Apollonius of Tyana. And there's a little written about him. There's some of the things that he spoke about when he was Apollonius. And then he became a master in that lifetime. And then according to one of the masters, the Master Djwal Khul, Jesus incarnated in the normal way as a child with a mother in Syria about 600 years ago. And of course outlived both his parents. And I'm just kidding. No, and has been living in the same body ever since. And then according to Benjamin Creme, when he brought the information about who and what the Master Jesus is and where he is up to date, Benjamin Creme said that Jesus was one of the masters that left his ancient retreat and went into the modern world and into a modern city. So he's the one that's in Rome. So there are masters there's a master in New York, there's a master in London, apart from Maitreya, there's one in Geneva, one in Darjeeling, one in Tokyo, one in LA, San Francisco, there's one in Beijing, there's one in Paris, and then the Master Jesus is in Rome, and then there's one in Moscow. So, and then there might be some others that have come into some cities since Benjamin Creme passed away, but those are the ones that he mentioned. But like I said, he'll be a teacher for the whole world in the same way. And even if you aren't a Christian, you would be able to approach him and ask him questions about the laws of life, I'm sure. But he'll basically be focused, and his work and effort will have to do with the churches and the teachings of these churches to help bring it more in line into the truth about who and what Jesus was and what he was trying to say a long time ago. All right. But thank you for the question. All right. Can you tell us about the different energies that the Lord Maitreya wields and is focused in the world? I can tell you a little bit about it. The main energy that's focused through Maitreya is the energy of love. And it's enhanced by two very, very powerful beings that aren't even in our solar system. They're overshadowing Maitreya in the exact same way that a master would overshadow a disciple, or as Maitreya overshadowed Jesus in Palestine, or Ben's master overshadowed him when he was being overshadowed, and so forth, in the exact same way. But they're not even in the solar system, and they're unbelievably advanced beings. One is known as the avatar of synthesis, and his energy is really clearing the field for the new way of thinking and relating and so forth, in a way. You know, I talk about that in relation to the Antichrist. He's not the Antichrist, and his energy isn't the Antichrist energy, but it's clearing the field for even more, you know, of the new energies of Aquarius coming in and so forth. And it's been said that his energy is so powerful, there isn't anything that can withstand it. So any kind of opposition to the priorities of Maitreya will simply be destroyed in a constructive way by these energies. So no amount of resistance to what Maitreya will be saying to humanity will be able to stop what eventually is going to happen because of this energy. The other one is the spirit of peace and equilibrium, and it has to that energy, or that being, really works within the law of cause and effect, and his energies work within the law of cause and effect. So according to Ben's own master, that being's energy is what's bringing to the surface all the corruption that we're seeing, and what's bringing to the surface all the divisions that we're seeing and so forth. But it's doing it so that eventually we will slip to the other side and swing to the other side rather quickly. So everything is equal and opposite. So if we're divided as we are today, eventually we will be the exact opposite of what we are today because of this energy of the spirit of peace and equilibrium. But it seems counterintuitive to think that we have to be divided in order to be unified, but we have to be divided in the way that we are because humanity has to make a choice. We have to decide, do we continue on in the way that we're doing and destroy ourselves, or do we accept the principle of sharing and give us a future? As Maitreya puts it, without sharing there will be no justice, without justice there will be no peace, and without peace there will be no future. So we have to decide for ourselves, what do we do? Now Maitreya has already kind of given us a spoiler alert. He already says that we are going to choose the right way forward. We are going to choose the principle of sharing and give us peace and give us a future. But in the meantime, we have to have this division in order to be able to do that. So hopefully that answers that question. I love you guys. Thanks for the questions, and I look forward to putting up videos in the very near future. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.